Hello and welcome to, of course, another movie review on HSG Unlimited, and this time it's probably a review that ain't going to get that many views. Because the movie itself, despite being 5 years old now, I don't hear anyone talking about it. And that kind of surprises me because it's on Netflix. It's a movie which does a lot with the premise that it's working with, and when I googled it to remember what the year it was that it came out in, 2015, it's actually got pretty good scores. Across most aggregator sites, it's got anywhere from a 6 out of 10 to a 7, a 70%. Those are pretty good scores. That's higher than a lot of well-known movies, especially within thrillers and horror territory. Now, a lot of things about this movie you could imagine going into it are going to work against it. Two things in particular. One is it has two directors. That's not usually a good start, unless they're siblings, the Wachowskis or the Russo brothers. Apart from those relatively few occasions, having more than one director generally isn't a good sign. It can be, but not usually. The second thing is, for me at least, I didn't recognise anyone in the film. There were no well-known faces. But that's actually an excellent choice, because not only do I think that was probably for budget reasons, but it's also crucial to the story. Now, to put this into simple terms, and as you can see over here, I'm talking non-spoiler review first, and then I'll get into some spoilers later on, primarily the ending. I think that having a well-known actor in here would have actually detrimentally affected the movie. And the reason why is because the concept behind this film is a group of people, I believe probably somewhere between 20 and 30 people, it's got to be at least that many, are arranged in a large circular group, hence the name. It's a dark room, they're all standing on these red circular pads like a big game show, and as far as the game, well, they're not told what it is. And that's kind of the point, because not only do you have to play the game, how do you play a game when you don't know how to? Well, of course you have to figure it out as you go along, and the stakes in this game, as you find out very early on in the film, are pretty high. Now, the concept of the film ties exactly into the kind of thing that I love. One location, one room, a story that takes place almost entirely, if not entirely, in one place. I love movies like that. I love the well-known ones, like 12 Angry Men, which this actually reminds me of to some degree, but also even really, really obscure ones like Freezer. Check it out if you haven't. I've done a review for it. This movie justifies the concept. It's not just a gimmick, because that single location is essential to the story. So it's completely justified, and I was very happy to see that. The second thing that I really liked, to touch on that point about not having any famous faces in there, I'm sure that for some of you, depending on the kind of movies that you watch, you might recognise maybe one person, maybe a couple even. But for most of us, there's no familiar faces, certainly not for me. If you had put a well-known actor in there, and I suspect it was primarily for budget reasons that they didn't, but if you had, it would have actually hurt the movie, because you would have immediately recognised that person, and then the stakes would have been dropped a little bit for them, because you think, well, oh, I know them, they're probably going to survive. That would have been a bad idea. And unless you completely populate the room with famous people, like 12 Angry Men essentially did, then, of course, it's not going to work. You've either got to go all or nothing when it comes to the casting. And thankfully, they went for nothing, which not only saves a ton of money, but also it means that you come in with a blank slate. You don't know any of these people. You don't recognise them. They're basically completely new to you. And the great thing about that is, because they feel just like normal, real people, even the way they talk, the way they interact, it feels realistic. So you actually build an affiliation with these characters as the movie progresses, and that is essential to the story, because you need to care about the stakes, but even certain characters who you might have liked, they might go down a bit. Certain characters who you might dislike might say something that makes you like them more. That's great in the story like this, and I really like the way it was written. This movie is almost entirely dialogue-based, just like 12 Angry Men. So in that way, it's almost like kind of an old-school film. And although this might be a remake, or at least inspired by something, I'm not sure what, if it is, I could entirely imagine this being like a 1950s sci-fi movie. And I'm surprised, in fact I would be surprised if somebody didn't already do something like this back in the day, because it would have been very easy to do. I mean, if they did 12 Angry Men, basically just do that, but with this black room and a slightly different concept. There are very little effects in the movie. There are some, but not many. So the majority of the film could have easily been done like back in the 1950s, and I think that would have been pretty cool if it was. Now, overall, if it's not obvious, of course I would recommend checking this movie out. It is on Netflix, that's where I watched it. Give it a chance. See if you like it. It's only like 82 minutes long, I think, anyway, so it's not like you're going to lose a huge amount of time. So I think that overall that's pretty much it for my non-spoiler talk. So if you haven't seen the movie, end the video here, go and check it out. If you've already seen it, though, and you haven't already skipped to this point in the video, now, of course, let's talk about that ending. Because the rest of the movie, you don't really need to get into spoilers that much. You know, most of it's just dialogue. The ending, though, is the only part of the film where things get very different. Now, there are two things about the ending which I think I would have liked to have seen done a little bit differently. And they definitely didn't ruin the movie for me. I just think they were almost a little underwhelming compared to how good the rest of it was. Because genuine tension is just rising and rising and rising throughout the film. At the end, though, when the guy who seems like he's been good all the way through finally, kills the pregnant woman and the kid, was it an effective shock? Well, you could say yes, but for me, I'd actually say no. Because it's done in a way that you almost don't even notice what's happened. And it takes you like a few seconds to really realise what he did. So even from the point of view of this shocking twist that he's actually a psycho kind of thing, it wasn't as effective as it could have been. And I think that's kind of a shame. But then to get to the ending, when the game ends and he gets out of the ship and then you see the on-budget CGI ships flying around with other people looking up at them, to me, that ending, I could have taken it or left it, really. Because he could have just left the room into the darkness, and I think you could have ended it there. If I were writing the movie, I think I would have ended it there. Because having an ambiguous ending is often a lot better than having a clear one. In this movie, the ending is clear. He escaped. He was rewarded for being a killer. That tells you something about these aliens. And then, the inference of the ending is that he's walking past that other group of people who are staring up at the ship, and probably they're going to be the next lot of people. I get what they were going for. But did we need to see that? I would argue no, because the CGI isn't that great. The ships look kind of goofy. We already know that people are getting sucked up into ships, so we don't need to see that inferred at the ending. The whole movie has implied that anyway. And I would have actually liked it a lot more if they'd have done what I said just now and have him just walk into the blackness, because then as the viewer, and this is something which I like to do in my books, I always like to leave certain aspects of the moral judgments up to the reader, rather than me defining it for you. And if you read my books, you can kind of notice that. In this movie, I would have liked it if they did that. Because if he walked into the blackness and that was it, you would have been able to reason to yourself what happens then. Do the aliens let him go? Or do they punish him for having the worst morals in the game? Because as it happens, you watch the whole movie and you actually learn nothing about these aliens. Nothing of note, anyway. And I think that's a shame, because by having it ambiguous, you could have at least hypothesized about it. Whereas having this clear-cut, he was released ending, well, to contradict what I just said, it kind of does tell you a little bit about the aliens. It tells you that they don't care about morals at all. Now, of course, you could have, again, inferred that from the game, but still, they could have been trying to find maybe the most honourable people, but clearly not. They could have been trying to find the most morally upright, or the kindest, or the most caring. Clearly, none of that applied. They were looking for essentially the most selfish people, the ultimate survivors. And another funny thing that the movie reminded me of, and I couldn't really say this in the non-spoiler part of the review because it would spoil stuff as far as this ending, another thing that this movie actually reminded me of, but without the humour, was a couple of videos here on YouTube called Superhero Bowl by Toon Sandwich. And there's a Supervillain Bowl as well. If you haven't watched those already, they're on YouTube, check them out, they're animated, basically like a Coliseum gladiator match between all the heroes of Marvel and DC and comics and movies, and then they did the same with the villains, and then they did a couple of extra ones. They're great, they're really funny. This kind of reminded me of that, because what that ending with the ships made me think is what these aliens might be doing is culling away all the people until you get to the winner, and then just abduct all the winners again until you've basically got no one left, or like one last person standing. Why? Well, we don't know. But it kind of reminded me of that at the end. That doesn't mean that that's what they were going for, but it's just what it reminded me of. So of course, tell me down below if you have seen the movie already. What did you think of it? Did you like it as I did? Were you pleasantly surprised? Were you disappointed, underwhelmed, maybe even bored? Would you have liked to have seen a different ending, maybe the one that I suggested? And of course, I shouldn't need to say check out the movie at this point in the video, because either you already have seen it or you just spoiled it for yourself. But overall, that's it for this review. Of course, stick around on the channel for plenty more, and if you enjoyed this kind of review, you'll definitely enjoy it here on the channel, because these are the exact kind of movies that I mostly like to look at. Undervalued gems. But that's it for this video. Of course, I will see you guys next time, and for now, as always, thanks for watching.